The advertisement had caught my eye, a small, unassuming blurb tucked away in the back of an outdoor magazine. Fire lookout position available remote mountain region. Ideal for those seeking profound solitude and a unique connection with nature. For me, Liam, it wasn't just a job, it was an escape. The city had become a suffocating cage of deadlines, digital noise, and endless, meaningless interactions. I yearned for a place where the only sounds were the wind and my own thoughts, a place where I could finally breathe. This fire lookout, perched high above the world, promised exactly that. I envisioned a summer of quiet introspection, surrounded by the raw, untamed beauty of the wilderness. I was, in hindsight, dangerously optimistic. The orientation was brief, a whirlwind of radio protocols, fire behavior patterns, and emergency procedures. They stressed the isolation, the sheer distance from civilization, the fact that help, if needed, would be hours, if not days away. I nodded, feigning attention, my mind already drifting to the panoramic views and the promise of unbroken silence. The tower itself was a testament to resilience, a weathered wooden structure anchored to a granite peak, offering an unparalleled 360-degree vista of an endless, undulating carpet of green. My living space was Spartan, a narrow cot, a utilitarian table, a small propane stove, and walls composed almost entirely of glass. My companions would be the crackle of the radio, a worn collection of paperbacks, and the immense, whispering forest. The initial weeks were a dream realized. The air was impossibly clean, the vistas breathtaking. Each sunrise was a masterpiece of evolving light and color, and the sunsets bled across the horizon in fiery streaks that lingered long after the sun had dipped below the peaks. My days were a rhythmic cycle of scanning the horizon for telltale wisps of smoke, meticulously logging weather patterns, and my evenings were dedicated to reading, journaling, or simply losing myself in the dizzying expanse of stars that blazed in the Inkai blackness. The silence was absolute, a profound, resonant stillness that slowly, subtly, began to permeate my very being. It wasn't an empty silence, but one teeming with the subtle symphony of the wild, the soft sigh of wind through ancient pines, the distant, piercing cry of a hawk, the incessant chirping of unseen insects. It was a profound beauty, and it was, without my conscious awareness, beginning to reshape me. But then, the quiet began to shift. It no longer felt merely peaceful, it felt heavy. Oppressive. I started to notice things. Insignificant at first, easily dismissed. A fleeting shadow at the very edge of my peripheral vision, just beyond the tree line, that would vanish the instant I turned my head. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound, carried on the wind, too regular to be natural, too elusive to pinpoint its origin. I'd tried to rationalize it away, a trick of the light, a persistent woodpecker, the wind playing games with the aging tower. But these rationalizations felt increasingly flimsy, like thin veils against a growing, undeniable unease. My sleep became fractured, punctuated by vivid, unsettling dreams that left me feeling more drained than rested. The solitude, once my cherished refuge, was slowly transforming into a suffocating confinement. The tapping sound became more frequent, more insistent. It wasn't always there, but when it was, it felt deliberate, like a signal. I'd spend hours staring out, trying to locate its source, my binoculars pressed against my eyes until they ached. Nothing. Just endless trees. The shadows at the edge of my vision grew bolder, sometimes seeming to coalesce into vague, humanoid shapes, always just out of focus, always disappearing when I tried to get a clear look. I started to question my own sanity. Was the isolation getting to me? Was I hallucinating? I began to keep a log, not just of smoke sightings, but of these strange occurrences. The tapping, the shadows, the unsettling feeling of being watched. I'd write down the time, the duration, my immediate thoughts. Reading it back, it looked like the ramblings of a madman. I stopped showing it to anyone, even in my mind. The radio, my only link to the outside world, became a source of anxiety. I'd hesitate before making my daily reports, afraid my voice would betray the growing tremor in my hands, the frantic beat of my heart. I started to hear things on the radio too, faint whispers beneath the static, sometimes my name, sometimes a garbled plea. I'd adjust the dial frantically, convinced it was just interference, but the feeling of being listened to, of being known, persisted. One afternoon, I was scanning the western ridge when I saw it. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A figure. It was far away, barely a speck, but it was there. Standing perfectly still, at the very edge of the tree line, looking directly at the tower. It was too distant to make out details, but its posture was unnervingly rigid, almost unnatural. I grabbed my binoculars, my hands shaking so hard I could barely focus. When I finally got it in view, it was gone. Just trees. I swept the area repeatedly, my heart pounding, but there was nothing. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, a bear, standing on its hind legs. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't. It felt like a deliberate act, a silent acknowledgement that I wasn't alone. The vast, silent forest, once my sanctuary, now felt like a sprawling, watchful entity, and I was its captive. The incident with the figure broke something in me. The line between what was real and what was a product of my isolation began to blur. I started to see faces in the patterns of the wood grain on the tower walls, hear muffled conversations in the incessant hum of the wind. My appetite vanished, and sleep became a terrifying ordeal. Every creak of the old tower, every gust of wind, became a potential threat. I found myself constantly checking the locks, even though I was hundreds of feet above the ground, miles from anyone. The silence, once a comfort, was now a deafening roar, filled with imagined sounds and unseen presences. I stopped making my daily radio reports. The thought of speaking, of betraying my fear, was unbearable. I knew they'd send someone eventually, but the thought of facing another human, of having to explain what I was experiencing, filled me with a different kind of dread. I was trapped not by physical bars, but by the insidious grip of my own mind. The food supplies dwindled, and I found myself rationing, each bite a grim reminder of my dwindling time. My clothes became stained and ragged, my hair matted. I was a ghost in my own tower, a prisoner of the vast, indifferent wilderness. One morning, I woke to a sound that wasn't imagined. A distinct, metallic clang from the base of the tower. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept to the window, peering down. A vehicle. A dark, unmarked truck, parked at the foot of the access road. Two figures, indistinct in the early morning light, were moving around it. They weren't park rangers. Their movements were too deliberate, too quiet. They were looking up at the tower. My breath hitched. They knew I was here. The tapping, the shadows, the whispers, it all coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable truth. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The isolation wasn't a sanctuary, it was a trap. And now, the hunters had arrived. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but the dread that filled me was absolute, a cold, crushing weight that settled deep in my bones. I was utterly, completely alone, and they were coming for me. I scrambled away from the window, my mind racing, a frantic, desperate scramble for a plan. There was no escape. The only way down was the access road, and they were at the bottom of it. I was trapped. I could hear faint sounds now, the crunch of gravel, the murmur of voices growing louder. They were starting their ascent. My breath came in ragged gasps, my chest tight with a terror more profound than anything I had experienced in the weeks of isolation. This wasn't the imagined fear of a mind playing tricks. This was real, tangible, and closing in. I huddled in a corner of the tower, clutching the radio, my only remaining link to the outside world. I tried to call for help, but my voice was a choked whisper, and the static on the line seemed to mock me. They were at the base of the tower now. I could hear their footsteps on the wooden stairs, slow, deliberate, each creak a hammer blow against my sanity. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sounds, the smell of their presence, a faint, metallic scent that seemed to cling to the air. I heard the door to the tower open, a slow, agonizing groan of old wood. Footsteps on the floorboards, heavy, unhurried. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, willing myself to disappear, to become invisible. I don't know how long I stayed there, frozen in terror. It felt like an eternity. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the tower was empty. The door was closed. The truck was gone. The forest was silent once more, but it was a different kind of silence now, a watchful, knowing silence. They had been there. I wasn't sure what they had done or why they had left, but the air in the tower felt different, heavier, colder. I stumbled to the radio, my hands shaking, and managed to make my report. They sent a relief team the next day. I was airlifted out, a shell of my former self. I never went back to the city. I couldn't. The noise, the crowds, they felt alien, suffocating. I live in a small cabin now, on the edge of a different forest, far from any towers. But sometimes late at night when the wind howls just right, I still hear the faint, rhythmic tapping, and I know with a chilling certainty that some things once seen can never be unseen. And the silence, the profound, heavy silence of the wilderness, still holds a terror I can never escape.